Today we talk to Dennis Markway, who's the founder and president of Iron Horse Wealth Management. He's a certified financial planner himself. As a matter of fact, he teaches the ethics class that all certified financial planners in the state of Iowa must take. After a distinguished career in financial services, both domestically and internationally, he's now making a difference in the lives of families and business owners. In this episode, he shares some of the tools he developed over 12 years of working for Fortune 500 companies and advice he would issue to every entrepreneur after running 4 businesses himself. Dennis, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey on how you've arrived to where you are today.
Well, I came as an entrepreneur kind of backwards. So I started off my career, working for financial services companies and in education. So not in entrepreneurial positions. But I think I always brought an entrepreneurial energy to everything I did in terms of looking to solve problems, to drive things forward and experiment with things along the way. But it was not natural. Certainly, I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs, although my namesake and my grandfather on my mother's side of the family has been a part of what they did their entire lives. So maybe an unorthodox approach to becoming an entrepreneur to do that kind of mid-career.
Tell us a little about I know you own a couple of businesses, 2 or 3. Tell us about the businesses you own today and a little bit about them.
Okay. I'll kind of roll them out in kind of their hierarchy. So my main business and my day-to-day revolves around Iron Horse Wealth Management, which is a fee-only financial planning firm where we work with families and a lot of businesses and consult with them to help make sure that they're reaching their goals and objectives. Next in line, I have a real estate company which holds the real estate that houses the different businesses that I'm in. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. The next one is I'm a significant shareholder in a brewery, Carroll Brewing Company in Carroll, Iowa. So a small craft brew house and tap room and all of that. So that's one of the newer ventures, which during 2020 has certainly been quite a challenge. The brand new venture has been also own a canning company which cans the beer for the brewery. So there's a little theme in what I do in terms of having a couple captive companies that have one major client and a major client that I'm in full control over.
I thought the theme was alcohol and money.
Oftentimes, it's not surprising they go together. So
that's right. After a good day at work, you get to drink the beer that you personally own.
Exactly.
If you're gonna drink it, you might as well own it.
Exactly.
True.
Have you had other businesses that you have since retired or sold or that did not work out for you?
As of yet, no. Haven't had any that have had to sunset at any point in time. So feel fortunate that everything that I've been involved with has had a lot of success. Although the brewery and the canning company still really being in very much startup mode, the future remains uncertain with those.
Okay. And the Iron Horse Wealth Management, how long have you been running that? And you're president of it.
President and founder of Iron Horse. That company's been around for about 8.5 years. There was really a sole prop that was affiliated with another organization for about 6 to 7 years before that. So it wasn't starting just off the ground, but there's so much that is distinct from the world that I was in before and where I am now. So really, that was the big piece of my entrepreneurial journey, was really walking off that cliff, which, of course, always has its challenges. And as well as you can plan out, me being a planner by nature, there's improvisation and things like that need to go hand in hand with the process, because how you envision it is probably not the way it's going to work out.
Talk to us about the walking off the cliff part. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can probably relate with that on how that feels to be at that point where you're about to make some decisions that are really going to be impactful. Can you describe that moment for you and what was going on there?
Yeah, I was actually that started the journey towards this long ahead of me launching the business. Really with thinking, licensure, planning for the future. But then it all came together at a head. So to kind of rewind the history of things real quick, I spent 3 years working for a multinational financial conglomerate out of Amsterdam. So I spent 3 years living and working in Amsterdam as the staff analyst to the executive board of this Fortune 500 company, making capital allocation decisions, planning decisions for how we were going to march those businesses forward. Um, and got done with that assignment, came back to stateside, and there really wasn't anything left for me to do here. So I had achieved everything that needed to be achieved. Had a boss that I worked for that really infected me with that pride of ownership, the desire to take your vision and see that come to fruition. And I just couldn't get that out of my system. So my walking off the cliff was leaving a $250,000 a year job and going to zero. Which, thank goodness, I have a wonderful, supportive, and loving wife who was patient and kind through that whole process. Sometimes I sit there and wonder, how did I ever make that decision? How did I ever do that? But now, many years later, looking back at it, I wish I would have done it a couple years sooner.
How did you? I mean, that's a great. I mean, you obviously have the loving, supportive wife, but there's a lot of people that deal with that looking at themselves in the mirror and seeing, I can't leave this job. I have to provide for my family and for my kids. And although I may be passionate about this entrepreneurial opportunity I may have in front of me, it's a risk. I got to start back at zero. You literally walked off the cliff. Other than the incredible support you had from the family side, how did you process that decision?
So, it was helped to a grand degree of, my family has a pretty strong savings culture. So we had a lot of money sitting on the side, which of course that got dwindled down pretty quick as things were getting going. We had kind of the backstop of a lot of cash to be able to burn to get this thing going. But it was absolutely immensely terrifying to do. But looking at career prospects that I had in front of me at that point in time, having really reached the pinnacle of what I could in that first career, there just wasn't any room left to go without moving to Manhattan or Hartford or something like that, and that just wasn't in the cards for my family. Of course, I also did this when I had an infant daughter at home. So again, maybe my sanity needs to be questioned. But having the cash on the side, the years spent preparing, and also being in a marketplace where I was a known commodity really helped too. So even among the financial community, I had been known as one of the subjects who's looked up to me, and felt really blessed to have the right kind of guidance, the right kind of support, the right network of potential prospects to reach out to that I would be able to help.
Wow, and that must certainly be something from Iron Horse perspective that you work on with families, is making sure they do have that nest egg saved up for themselves, because you just never know when you may want to go after an opportunity or the emergency fund. And I know certainly it provides a tremendous amount of luxury for you to have had that when you wanted to make that decision. So I'm sure that's probably one of your leading pillars.
Yeah, absolutely. That 3 to 6 months that every family should have in an emergency fund account. But if you have plans and goals and objectives for other things, like if you wanted to own real estate, or if you wanted to start a business, you need that startup capital there. And it could be, it could be a really big number in the case of real estate. It could be a small number if you're a small to moderate sized investor in a business, and if it wasn't your day to day, but you were just investing. But for me, being arguably a control freak, I wanted control of my destiny. Had a very specific vision of what I think financial services for families and small businesses should look like. Doing it the best way possible in service of the people that I'm here to help. Really took that larger investment.
Can you reflect for us on lessons that you learned at Iron Horse for the 8.5 years that you've had that? And whether it be a learning lesson where it was expensive and it cost you money, or maybe a learning lesson of something that went really well, but then how you applied that to one of your startups.
Okay. Gosh, one of my the toughest lessons learned for me was just managing cash flow, and doing things the right way. Having the right plan in place, deploying the resources that I had the best way possible. Certainly made some mistakes along the way with Iron Horse. I think every entrepreneur is deep-seated and probably learning some lessons the hard way, and I did. Certainly when we undertook an expansion of staff and the office here, paid a huge chunk of that with cash rather than financing it because, again, I'm savings-minded, somewhat debt-averse. But that was a mistake. I took, just too much on the chin with that, and it led to where we had, leaner times ahead of us. And I think if I could rewind that decision and do it all over again, we would have been a lot more comfortable with our cash flows at that point in time. Right now, I mean, that's something in all of the challenges that have come forth in 2020 with a, largely in-person service company like the brewery, where for a good chunk of the year, we couldn't get in to visit bars and restaurants or grocery stores to get our product on the shelf. And to not manage cash flow properly during this time, and I know that we're all kind of wandering in the dark, trying to figure out things the right way when the playbook has been torn up in a year like 2020 for an organization like that. So, working through, with our investors and capital calls and things of that nature, making sure we're doing what we need to do to make sure bills are getting paid, and we're positioning the organization for success. That's such a hard thing to do when, again, there's no script for, I think for really any startup organization. But certainly in a year like 2020, it has exacerbated that situation. So, with me being really fulfilling the CFO role for the brewery, that's been a big chunk of the advice that I've given to management over the years. Let's be careful, be cautious, make sure that we have enough in reserve to deal with any kinds of emergencies that we need to deal with, and make sure that we have enough capital available to make sure that we're going to further the organization the way that we need to.
Can you speak to on the managing cash flow side, which you highlighted well there? What are some of the tools that you would recommend that entrepreneurs use, whether it be software or a planning tool, and any philosophy that every entrepreneur should know when it comes to cash flow?
Well, I'm a huge advocate of first and foremost, you have to have the right team around you. So, I mean, boils down to your attorney, your accountant. If you have a financial person that you're able to use as a sounding board for issues that are coming along, I think it's really important to have a diversity of advice, including mentors that you can trust along the way. I've been certainly also very fortunate to have a lot of people who I've been able to turn to get advice along the way too. Tools wise, I have, I don't know what the right way to call it, but I'll say a romantic relationship with QuickBooks. just spend a lot of my time geeking out among the numbers. So if that's not your strong suit, and for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's not. The financial management side of what they do, but there are classes that you can take, advice that you can get. As with a lot of other things, learned some things the hard way with QuickBooks. But for more technical things, I've always turned to my CPA to help me through any kinds of issues that pop up that are beyond what my bandwidth is currently. But I use that as a learning lesson to further my knowledge. That in turn helps me further that knowledge for other people.
Now, I want to get in the weeds for just 1 minute, and then we'll scope back out. I know a lot of entrepreneurs use QuickBooks. What are a couple of your favorite views since you geek out on it? What are a few of your favorite views that every entrepreneur should be using?
Yeah. For me, I am relentless. We don't have an enormous amount of transactions that run through. So I'm always doing updates every 2 weeks. There are, my accountant has gotten mad at me from time to time. It's like, you should be doing it more often. That we just don't have enough transactions, so I'm not going to spend the extra time with it. But I'm diving through the numbers on that, really first and 15th basis. So tomorrow is actually my accounting geek out day, which will be the 16th. So see, a good half of the month. But really like to dive through that, run comparisons between where were we last year, and then I'll look back at trends for any kind of seasonality in business or anything that jumps out. But I look at both that every 2 weeks. Then I'll look at monthly comparisons, quarterly comparisons, annual comparisons. Because they all tell a little bit of a different story, and you need to know some of the history that's happening throughout. But even with clients that I sit down with, when we're digging through their P&L, for example, our new hires that we have at the company here are college students who are coming in as interns. That's one of the exercises that I put them through. Let's look at the monthly, quarterly, annual, and see how different of a story shows up, depending upon the intervals that you're looking at. And ask the whys. Why is revenue up so high this quarter compared to last year? Or why is this expense so out of whack? But get deep in the weeds and into the individualized transactions and say, okay, well, it just happened that we weren't expecting our fleet of laptops to get old. So started having problems. So we have to replace those. There's no choice. So our technology expenses were up a lot higher.
Nice. So every entrepreneur should be checking QuickBooks at least twice a month. You happen to do it on 1st and 15th. Looking at those comparisons on monthly, quarterly, and annual, really try to understand the story that each of those comparisons tell that's different, and question why. Why is the story changing? Why is that different year over year?
Yeah, I think it's just imperative to have your eyes on the numbers like that. And again, for many people, depending upon the kind of business that they have, the financial management of a business is just not something that they love as dearly as whatever it is they do. Whether they're a chiropractor or a manufacturer or a financial knucklehead. All of us may have other different things that we're really passionate about. But entrepreneurs really need to be in control of those numbers and where they're going. So, I'd be remiss not to mention the balance sheet. I consistently joke with my accountant. They're more worried about the balance sheet. I'm more worried about the P&L. But important to be tracking that over time as well. Much like in personal finance, you should be taking a look at what your net worth statement looks like on a regular basis. So, are things trending in the right direction, or are they not? And what kind of corrective action may you need to take?
Yeah, certainly. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're in the business and following the business, specifically a startup business, right? How is the business performing? Is a very high profit statement view of things.
Mhm.
But then when you start looking at it on the grand scheme, as your business continues to grow, whether it be your family, your personal family wealth, your personal balance sheet, or your company's balance sheet, the balance sheet ultimately tells the true story, right? In terms of
Yes, it does.
how you ultimately perform. And so, like, it's great that you have the CPAs that are helping you look at the balance sheet. I know way too many entrepreneurs that they'll pop their P&L on the table and go, look how well I'm doing, and then you look at the balance sheet and it tells a completely different story, because of how that's articulated. So I think it's a really, really good one. One of the things that keeps striking me in this conversation right off the bat is, you seem like a disciple of Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
Like, here's somebody who understands business and finances enough. Decides to start his own business, gets out of corporate America, high paying job, goes in to start his own business, immediately goes into real estate and owning other businesses. And the first thing you're worried about within companies is cash flow. And Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad Cash Flow Quadrant was probably one of my favorite books
Yeah.
ever. When he talks about how cash is really king and how to maximize cash flow and those components. Is that a fair statement in terms of?
Very fair statement. So yeah, it's so imperative. But at the same point in time, every particularly a startup, I think of each of those of my companies as another child. And when a child is a newborn, when a business is a newborn, it's going to keep you up at night. It's you're going to lose sleep. You're going to spend a lot of time. It requires a lot of insights and maintenance with it. And then as the years are going by, some of that ongoing maintenance gets a little bit easier. It can start to do things on its own. In terms of generating cash flow for the future. So, I look at it as, I've got a 15-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old daughter, but I've got, I'd say this is an 8.5-year-old son, so behaves himself most of the time, is well potty trained, does the job that he needs to do. The real estate company is the same age. The brewery's 2.5 years old, so I can't count on him to not have an accident or problems here and there and require a lot more guidance. The canning company is a year old, so that requires even more. So, but then also each are set up with kind of a different kind of risk. And I spend a lot of time, having grown up in the insurance and financial services industry. I think about risk a lot with business. And I think about it more than a lot of other entrepreneurs do, just trying to hedge and protect against as many risks as possible without strangling the life out of the things that we do.
And when you evaluate risk, Dennis, what are some of the key things that you're looking at?
Yeah. Certainly the financial risk, but a lot of reputational risk. My first job in my life was working for McDonald's. Which that's a fantastic example of trying to deliver consistency in a business. So every can that comes off the canning line has to look the same way. The product that goes inside the cans has to taste the same way every time that it comes out. The services that we deliver to small businesses and families needs to be consistent. So it's a challenge when growing that in a very labor intensive business where it's a relationship and person to person business, to make sure that my associates are handling things the same way that I would. So there's that consistency of message out there that helps to head off a lot of those other risks. But you name the level of financial risk with it. If it's market risk, inflation, interest rates, all of those moving parts have a dramatic impact on all of our businesses. In particular, inflation is so devastating to so many business owners if they're not able to pivot appropriately.
Can you elaborate on that? That's certainly something that small business entrepreneurs don't think about a lot, if at all, is inflation.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how they should be thinking about that in their business?
Well, almost like anything else with business, I think that we need to be thinking 5 to 10 years down the road. And how do you position yourself so you're going to be competitive, have the right level of growth, and that definitely plays into inflation. That if you're not making pricing adjustments to take into account how the financial environment around you is changing. So if you're building building cars and not factoring into the account what those input prices are, that's going to impact how you're pricing your services moving forward. Same thing comes into play with my main business with Iron Horse Wealth Management. Making sure that we're pricing our services appropriately to make sure that we're not behind the eight ball as labor costs keep going up and other input costs to our business keep going up. So making sure that there's that flexibility, and for us, one of the natural hedges for inflation is the stock market. So having a stock market inflected business that leads that, but there's potentially issues with financial planning services and things like that that we do for a flat dollar amount that we may have to make adjustments with that over time. Thus far we've resisted it. But something that inevitably, given the time that it takes working with families and small businesses, that's something we'll have to do. But just building that in, so when that's necessary to communicate to people, we're taking the right steps with it.
John, you and I were talking the other week about financial advice that I think you were giving a colleague of yours who had a business. I'm curious, on your end, John, any financial advice that you'd recommend to every entrepreneur? And then if you're open to playing this game, and then I want to turn it over to Dennis to hear Dennis's commentary on what you share.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key components. I'm going to give you a couple. And the first one I'll say applies to what provided Dennis the ability to jump over the cliff, if you will, into the entrepreneurial landscape, which was have the financial means to be able to do it. Way too many companies operate lean and mean on cash. They keep investing their money thinking, oh, well, if I need to invest to grow, I need to invest to grow, but they don't actually put money aside for strategic investment growth down the line, and they never have the money to be able to hire the people at the right time or invest in sales and marketing when they should, or things of that nature. So savings and putting money aside to invest in your business strategically is different than spending all the money you have in every year's annual plan to be able to grow your business. I think that's a big key that is missed. And in the businesses where we found ourselves sitting on some pretty significant cash reserves, those were the years that we were able to grow our business exponentially because we were able to strategically target those dollars very well. And sometimes as an entrepreneur, a lot of entrepreneurs are called cheap. We like to call it frugal. But if you're frugal enough and you don't have waste and you can build up cash reserves, you're able to really strategically invest those dollars. So that's my first one. I think is critically important and missed by, I'd say, 95% of entrepreneurs, because they're either spending everything they're making or they're retracting all the money they're making into their lifestyle because they have to get paid themselves for their work. So there's nothing left in the business to invest strategically. Second thing for me is cash flow. And we talked about it. Cash is king and queen, they like to say. And if you don't manage your operating cash flow on an annual basis and you're just looking at your P&L and going, oh, wow, I made some good money, but you're not looking at the implications of the balance sheet and your liabilities and so on and so forth, you just don't know. I've had several businesses where the P&L or EBITDA of the business looked very attractive, but the net operating cash flow did not. Yeah. And there's another book that I love a lot by Vern Harnish, the Scaling Up book, and he goes through the different components, and one of them is cash. And I attended a webinar during the middle of COVID. Everybody's doing a webinar. Attended a webinar by the Scalable guys, scaling up authors, and it was about cash flow in your business and providing us the formulas on how to manage your cash flow on an annual basis. And it really helped our company this year. Looked at, okay, on a net cash perspective, how are we doing? Month to month, year over year, things like that. So those are my two things. Make sure you strategically save to be able to invest in your business, and know what your net operating cash is on an annual or monthly or annual basis.
I'll layer on to that, and then would love to hear, Dennis, your thoughts. Obviously, cash flow we've been talking about a bit, but John, when you're talking about the cash reserves, we see in the franchise businesses that I work with, same thing, unless it's specifically highlighted, retained earnings does not show up on the P&L. They look at management compensation, which is a salary they pay themselves if they were to replace what they do functionally in the business. They look at EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. They look at that. And they almost look at their EBITDA as their profit, but somehow that bleeds into their personal money and then all of a sudden there's nothing left. And to earmark retained earnings on a chart of accounts is a really important business function. I think, John, is specifically what you're looking at when you talk about cash reserves. Dennis, would love for you to contribute to the thought on that.
Yeah, I think it all leads to something else that's really important. That again, unless you have control over those numbers, is managing for profit. I mean, all of us are in business to make money. I mean that is one of the functions of owning and running a business. And without the proper cash flows, without having investable dollars that you can use to further what your mission may be, you're not going to get to that level of profit. Really a handful of years ago, that became one of the focal points here was really trying to manage up our profit numbers to build up excess reserves, to be able to turn around and either acquire competitors, things like we did this year. So we opened an additional office. So based in Des Moines, Iowa, we opened an office in Rochester, Minnesota. We may be on track to open another office in 2021. I mean, that's fantastic to have that kind of beachhead. But if you don't execute on having savings dollars to build up to facilitate those things, you don't have the right level of cash flows to be able to afford either the purchase or the rent that you need to pay. If the profit, if you're not managing for profit properly, then those opportunities are lost. I mean, I mentioned the other day to a group that I'll come clean with my profession. A number of my peers don't save anything for retirement, but they dispense that advice on a regular basis. Now, I firmly believe that the rich and John, you should be saving for retirement. Through your corporate retirement plan, if you have one, or other savings vehicles to build for your future, and you should have that level of diversification. So that all your eggs are not necessarily in the entrepreneurial basket. Now, with success, a lot of us have a fair degree of our net worth and cash tied up in these enterprises. But these enterprises are not necessarily terribly liquid. So to have resources on the side that you can certainly deal with immediate financial emergencies, but then other goals and objectives that you may have too, whether it is acquiring other businesses, acquiring a vacation home someplace you can escape what's outside my window here. It's a 4-letter S word sitting on the ground. But those can be really important things that keep a patient and loving spouse happy with you too through all the challenges that you have.
Yeah, Dennis, I don't know. I give up. What's the 4-letter S word sitting on the ground?
Big piles of snow in Iowa.
There we go. I got that.
Well, I think it's very good, Rich. I appreciate you asking that question, and you brought up a really good point. And we all three of us kind of gave the same directional answer to this, right? Which is make money, but also retain the money you've earned. Don't waste it. And waste it to a certain degree could be unnecessary expenses. It could be over distributing to you to make unnecessary expenses on your personal side of things too.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something, Rich, retained earnings. And if I had to guess, what percentage of entrepreneurs understood what their retained earnings are right now on their balance sheet and what that even means, they probably wouldn't know what that means. And I think it's critically important. It goes back to something you mentioned earlier, just your CPAs is really understanding your balance sheet is critical because that retained earnings will tell you what you have retained from your earnings for future investment in your business.
Yeah.
And that number is critically important for a business to know.
Yeah, and I see so much of earnings that either gets kind of you're spending money to get your taxes down, so you're just kind of spending ahead on things, so you end up with zero retained earnings, or in the situation that you mentioned too, where ownership is taking everything out of the company, and essentially, when I was in Holland, what they would say about a business like that is you're starving a skinny cow. So you're taking everything out of this. Oftentimes, it's to afford lifestyle creep and things like that. To avoid that, I mean, I think there's judicious levels of retained earnings that you should have. Based upon your business, and there are businesses that are sitting on $3, $4, $5 million of retained earnings, which in businesses like I have wouldn't make sense. But this, unless you want to go into big time acquisition mode.
Yep.
So, but having something there that can carry the business in the event that you have 2020 happen again, where you may have some very thin quarters moving forward, and you've got the ability to survive that because you have the earnings that are sitting there in the bank account with the company.
Yeah. If it's okay, I'd like to pivot to this question about advisors. And I'm a true believer that you're only going to be as strong as who you surround yourself with. And I'm sure for the entrepreneurs and individuals that you advise, there are those who don't seek advisement because they feel like they can go alone, and there's those who hire world-class professionals to help them along the way. What types of advisors, financial and otherwise, do you think entrepreneurs need to surround themselves with in order to really maximize their own learnings and potential from either their business or their families?
Certainly, without question, has to, I think, start with a great CPA. Because whether that is I have an annual meeting with my CPA late in the year to save myself from myself. So here's where we stand. We've got a little time left to get to the end of the year. What do we need to do to optimize the situation for the company and me personally? Absolutely, have the right attorney to walk alongside you for all of your business issues, and whether it is we highly value our employment attorneys. We value otherwise business and contract attorneys that we work with, and work with people that are specialized in those areas. Whether it is a certified financial planner like me, who specializes in working with small business owners, that can be a really helpful resource for you as well as an advisor. But then certainly mentors that are in the same industry or affiliated industries, or just people that have sound business sense and abilities and qualifications that you'd be able to ping questions to. My old boss, who is the chairman of that company over in Amsterdam that I worked with, actually resides back in my hometown here. And I go to him from time to time with greater than just business challenge issues, but also life challenge issues. So he's one of the greatest philanthropists in our community. So me, all of a sudden coming into resources that I've not had in my life before, to be able to rely on people who've been there, done that, to share with you just their perspectives on things. So when I'm trying to be a good corporate citizen, giving back to the community that's given us so much over time, making sure that we're doing that the best and smartest ways. So. Yeah, I would say definitely mentors, accountant, attorney, planner are really important in the equation.
And are there any like if you're seeking out those individuals, a CPA, an attorney, a CFP, or just mentors, is there anything you would say to do or not do as it relates to the engagement of these professionals or advisors?
Yeah. Absolutely. Certainly, I know very well with my profession, there's certain things that you should be doing. Certainly there's public resources on all of those different professions. Whether it's for financial planners, CFP board, or the SEC, or FINRA, or the state insurance department. To check up on their background. So, what are their qualifications? What's their education? What's their experience? I've got a great barn burning fact finder for consumers who are looking for a financial professional. That just fantastic questions that you should be asking of your representation. But I think a lot of the same questions apply to whether it's a CPA or a payroll provider or attorney. What is your level of expertise in the areas that I need assistance? So to not be afraid to set up those meetings and ask those questions, interview people to see if there is a fit or not, I think is a great process to go through. I personally have a rule of threes. So for every activity that I look to engage in, I'm interviewing three CPAs, three attorneys, three payroll companies. So I can pick and choose, compare and contrast pricing, services, and things like that to make sure I'm getting the right deal, the right advisor along the way for me.
And one last question on that. I don't know if I'm sure you've experienced this before, but there's a certain stickiness that comes along with having advisors, CPAs that know your business. They've been doing your taxes for years, or an advisor who knows your whole family and knows everything that's been going on, and lawyers, the same thing. But I have encountered over my period people who are working with somebody, not thrilled, not extremely happy, but feel they have to stay with that advisor for a bunch of different reasons, even though whether it be, personal attachment or don't want to restart from zero. I personally have had experiences where I made one of those hard leaps from one to the other and couldn't imagine it otherwise, right? Because I was missing all these other opportunities that the other advisor was not aware of or wasn't pushing or working on my account. How would you advise people go about switching from a committed advisory relationship out of that to a new one? And when should they look to do that?
Yeah. I think it should be very process driven. Like a lot of things, I'm a control and process guy with with some things. So, I don't think, jumping ship every year or every couple of years necessarily makes sense unless you see a glaring omission or, somebody's dropped the ball somewhere on something really important. But every 3 to 5 years, maybe be interviewing again. It doesn't take a lot of time. It'll cost you a couple hours, maybe. And particularly on the financial side, you'll get a load of emails and things like that. But every 3 to 5 years, just test the water, make sure that you're getting the products, services, and advice that you should be getting. And I think that is more than likely enough. I just went through that process this year. on the insurance side of things. My company, we don't sell insurance. We advise people on it, but we don't sell it. So I go to an external insurance agent who handles my insurance affairs. And just thought it was time to make a switch, both in terms of the price and services. So periodically shop around. Have a good relationship with the old advisor. Have a great relationship with the new advisor. But just the right time to be doing that, and I think that 3 to 5 years is a good benchmark. Absent some form of really corrective action that needs to be taken. So, I mean, if, for example, your liability insurance on your business, where you haven't had any kind of claims, goes up 50% in a year, well, I'd start looking around.
Absolutely.
You sounded emphatic that you had a barn-burning fact finder. Is that something that you're open to sharing with our listeners that John may be able to post on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. So
okay.
I'd be happy to get that over to you.
That'd be much appreciated. So I find in our business, we talk to our business owners about picking their year being about one of 3 things, and you can only pick one. It's profit, growth, or lifestyle, because they're in competition with each other when you really think about it. If you're going for profit, you're not going to grow as much. If you're going for profit, you're not going to have as much lifestyle. If you're going for growth, you won't profit typically quite as much, and you won't have as much lifestyle. If you're going for lifestyle, you won't grow or profit quite as much. So I'm curious, from a certified financial planner view, what would be just kind of your quick take on each of the 3 of those, on what entrepreneurs should be thinking of financially when they go for each of them? So if I kind of throw them out to you and go, profit, what if somebody's selecting, this year is all about profit, what are 1 or 2 things that they should think of? And then I'm going to cycle through the other 2 with you.
Consider inflation.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Raise your prices.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a profit, I think that we direct things to expense management, trying to get as much in line as we possibly could. We'd be circling those key territories where the majority of the spends are taking place, because that's probably the areas where that you can color around the edges a little bit and make enough of a difference to goose up profits. But it could be, looking at the underlying fixed expenses that you have, that there needs to be additional top line growth in order to, really have, profit match what your organization looks like right now. So we'd have to kind of diagnose both sides of that equation. Is there an income problem, or is there an expense problem that you need to manage more closely? But I'd say my natural inclination, because oftentimes a lot of those expenses, the entrepreneur can control some of those. So to try and flex that control there.
So if it's about profit, look at expense management, circle your biggest spends, and question them if they could be reduced or eliminated. What if I said my year was all about growth? Dennis, this year, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm coming to you. You're my certified financial planner. I'm telling you, this is all about growth. That's what I want to do. What advice on 1 or 2 nuggets would you have for me financially to consider there?
Oh man, that has a lot of moving parts to it, depending upon the type of business that you're in. But really, it would be, I'll provide the example that with how I'm approaching the brewery right now. Because that's one of the issues for 2021 will be growth. The areas that we're going to focus on are utilizing our personnel effectively to increase our footprint. So there's really the personnel management, deployment of additional personnel to open up new markets. There's really working through relationships and opportunities, bird dogging different opportunities that we may have. that aren't in hand quite yet, but trying to expand those as much as possible. So, kind of looking at the core business lines of what you do and say, okay, let's set targets around those different things that we're doing and how much we feel is a reasonable growth goal. What's maybe a stretch goal that we could shoot for. So, for example, with the brewery, how could we expand on apparel and merchandise sales? Not a huge line item, but makes a difference. How do we work through additional external distribution of canned product? How do we work through additional lines, keg lines that are out there? Then there's also managing through the tap room that we have. How do we drive more people through our doors to push more product to get more sales? So it's advertising, it's marketing, it's feet on the street.
Got it. So I got three things there on growth. Look at how are you utilizing personnel effectively, maybe dust off those old job descriptions and look at how to repurpose who's doing what in the business. New opportunities and how to expand. So look in different areas there, and then setting targets, setting goals on those. What about the last one? If I said, hey, Dennis, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm coming to you, you're my certified financial planner, and I want my year to be all about lifestyle. I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I got in the business so I could have a little lifestyle around here. What should I be thinking about financially when it comes to having a year about lifestyle?
I don't understand the question. No, I would say is again trying to manage through both that top line and bottom line. I mean, there has to be the underlying inflows that are coming in. If you manage to give it to provide enough space between that and your expenses, so there's excess that's going to be thrown off from the business. I think every business owner should do that to a degree and responsibly, while maintaining the proper amount of savings and overall cash flow for the business. I would just, certainly caution being careful with it because that can be a slippery slope. If this year is the year that I'm going to try to coast and enjoy more of my time. Making sure that again that's not full on lifestyle creep. But I think every business owner, who has suffered for their art, needs to be adequately rewarded for that. But again, everything within reason along the way. So I think there's kind of a reasonability test that needs to be done there, depending upon what kind of cash the business is able to throw off. And if it's there, then you may be able to enjoy it. If it's not, then again, what kind of steps do you need to take next to make sure that vision comes to fruition?
Yeah, thanks for that. I got two things. Look at your top line and bottom line. Make sure you have enough room. You can have a year about lifestyle if your top and bottom line are where they need to be. And then the other one was just be careful. It was the second time you mentioned lifestyle creep. I never heard those two words together, but it makes so much sense that there's a piece of be careful that it doesn't turn into a lifestyle creep, that it is a one-time thing. You're taking a year to go recharge your batteries, and then you're likely going to want to get back into your business. So have realistic expectations on short-term impact to the business, and it's not a long-term lifestyle creep.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I'll tell you what, it's very hard to find people in today's society who are not victims to lifestyle creep. It's a very, very difficult thing to avoid, or not even avoid, to not fall victim of, because you have growing families, you yourself, you age and you want to enjoy life in different ways, and it's a very difficult thing. And there's certainly as well the whole competitive spirit of wanting to be able to do things that other people you see are experiencing or doing, and so lifestyle creep comes into play. So I think it's a very to your point, Rich, it's a very interesting term that probably needs more conversation and evaluation. I did want to add something to the lifestyle piece. I think it's an incredible time as well for leaders to set up their business succession.
Yeah.
Because if this year was about profit, I should probably be thinking, if I'm going to have a lifestyle year, I should probably be thinking about that a year ahead of time. And I should be setting up, if I can, as much as possible, the infrastructure of succession, because there's all this proverbial, what happens if the owner gets hit by a bus? Well, you could have a lifestyle decision where you decide to sit back from your business, enjoy the profits, and go drink cocktails on the beach. But you could also have a lifestyle year because you have to take care of your life,
Yeah.
and you need someone to come over and oversee your business. And if you're not prepared for that, you could be in big trouble. So I truly believe that businesses should always be thinking about, how do I set up my business so I can have a lifestyle year and or an emergency year, shall I need it? What's succession planning and leadership I'm putting in place to run the business while I'm out?
Yeah, good point. So, but I think to maybe mirror a little bit of what you say, I do think that business owners should be really planning out into the future what they want out of their business, what they need to do. I have a very structured plan of what the next 12 to 15 years are going to mean for me, being 48 years old. The specter of retiring sometime is not that far away, in all actuality. And going from the schedule that I hold now, which is about 60 hours a week, um, to something lesser than that, it absolutely takes the right infrastructure there to make sure that there are the people there that are going to be able to backfill for tasks that need to be done, leadership that needs to be in place, management that needs to be in place for everything. So as as clearly as you can think and design that out, I think can lead to that kind of lifestyle year, or even for entrepreneurs who get into really a lifestyle business where it's all kind of based around the life that they truly want to lead.
That's great. Thank you so much for being on, Dennis, and sharing with us. And if you had one last kind of soundbite that you were going to give to every entrepreneur that they can take value from, what would be one last thing that you'd like to leave as a bit of a legacy for people who are hearing your voice and they run their own business?
I would say, I got into business in kind of violent revolution to how I saw financial services being deployed out there. So we try to do things a really different way. But I would say for every entrepreneur out there, if you have your vision in place, you're doing the right things. We all have hard times, rough times in business, but have faith that if you're doing the right things and taking care of the people that are around you, you're a good steward in your community. Good things can happen. So I think it's really an unwritten law that's out there. And I don't know if from a faith perspective, if it's coming from the Judeo-Christian ethic or if it's karma. But if you do good things, you create opportunities for good things to happen in this world, and in your community and in your life. It may not always be in the time frame that you would like it to happen, or when you need it. But to put that out there the right way and just have faith that it'll carry you through some of those challenging times.
Thank you, Dennis.
You're very welcome. So this was a lot of fun, guys.
Thank you very much.
Please stay with us for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down the podcast.
One of the things that I'm looking at, John, is the relationship on this idea of lifestyle creep with a few of the other concepts that we had talked about today. What I see with our franchise owners, one of the ways that they beat back lifestyle creep comes back to something that Dennis talked about early on, was his family had a savings culture. I think that savings culture, although we didn't dig into it with them, I think that savings culture might be easily best defined as pay yourself first. Don't pay everybody else and just plan on keeping whatever's left. Pay yourself first and then pay your accounts payable, which kind of speaks back to the retained earnings as a business owner. So I feel like that would be a tool against lifestyle creep, is pay yourself first, just like you would in your personal life, do it in your business life. Pay that retained earnings first, which is going to reduce the amount of money for lifestyle creep.
Yeah, I think we're getting into an interesting topic here with lifestyle decisions, because I'm sure we read it together, probably, The Millionaire Next Door, right? The
Sure.
book. And 20 years ago, probably. And you have people that live next to you that drive paid off cars from 15 years ago, that are teachers at the local school, and are millionaires because of the way they save and invest. And you have others that drive real nice vehicles and live in nice expensive homes and have big jobs, big salaries, that don't have any wealth built up whatsoever, but they chose lifestyle. And to the same point, you talk about businesses, you got to choose to either have the profit or the growth or the lifestyle. Individuals make the same decisions. Entrepreneurs as individuals make same decisions. Am I going for maximizing my income and future wealth? Am I going for the lifestyle I'm going for? Or how do I blend the two? And even when you talk a little bit about talking to your franchisees about, hey, every year you got to make a decision between profit, growth, or lifestyle. Have you guys ever asked them in advance, like, what are your next 3 years? Define them. Have you guys done that, or is it more year to year?
We go through with them, and in creating a playbook with them, it includes setting out 10-year goals, 3-year and 1 year. The decision around profit, growth, or lifestyle, we've typically had be kind of a 1-year play when they're getting their business plans evaluated by their peers, their colleagues. We do have them look further out. We actually have an exercise called vision planning that we do with them, where they look at their ultimate professional vision, their ultimate personal vision, and then look at, okay, now the reality is I own this business. How is that going to act as a stepping stone to where I want to get?
Yeah, sometimes I try to look at things from an abundance perspective versus a scarcity perspective. I look at things, go, why can't you have profit, growth, and lifestyle in the same year? Why can't you do that? I think you can, ultimately. I understand what you guys are saying is, what are you focusing on this particular year? But I think if you have a long-term plan like Dennis was talking about, and you're looking 3, 5, 10 years out, you should be able to plan this out a little bit as you go along. And I think going back to your whole point about lifestyle creep, I think it's very tough. It's a really tough thing to navigate. Even business lifestyle creep, meaning you get used to having coffee and cookies and lunch brought in every day. Well, to take that lunch out every day and say, hey, we're not going to have lunch come in anymore because we're trying to be more profitable, that creates a culture rift in your business. So even culturally, businesses have a lifestyle creep within their business. It's very hard to scoop back. And when it does get scooped back, as you probably saw, it probably happened during the COVID crisis a lot, is companies remove all of these luxuries that have been built up over the years and just take them out of the business in this one full swoop. If COVID hadn't happened, there'd be tons of money spent in those areas as part of their business culture or lifestyle creep.
As you say that, I am reminded you can have profit, growth, and lifestyle all together. However, that is when you have a general manager in place who's doing the leadership and management functions that often our franchise owners do for a while. It's not until you have a professionally managed business that you can be sipping a drink on the beach and still have there be growth and profit happening. Someone has to be running the business. So until you get someone in the business who's doing that, it's highly unlikely you're going to have all three. But as soon as you can replace yourself, then it's absolutely possible. I'd say not just in our franchise business, in any business. If there's
I think you're also talking to the difference between entrepreneurs who work in their business versus entrepreneurs that work on their business.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs that work on their business probably have a better lifestyle, can focus on areas of growth, and are probably making good enough money to be able to afford themselves the ability to do that. Entrepreneurs that are working in their business may make enough money to pay themselves every year, but they don't have time to think on their business and grow their business.